My son watched his stepsister die with enough money in his account to save her. I put him in prison 5 years ago for something he didn't do. The last thing my son said before walking out of that hospital room was that he came to make sure we could never ruin his life again. He didn't say it with anger, or at least not the kind of anger I expected after everything. He said it the way someone reads a legal statement, clearly, without decoration, finished. And then he left, and Alejandra died 3 weeks later. And I have been sitting with the question of who is responsible for all of it every single day. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments which city you're watching from. My name is Gerald. I am 54 years old, and I want to be very precise about what I am and am not asking for in telling this story, because I think precision is the only thing I have left that resembles honesty. I am not looking for someone to tell me my son was wrong to walk away from a dying girl with money in his pocket. I am not looking for someone to tell me I was right to believe 2 crying teenagers over my own child. What I am looking for, and what I suspect I will never fully find, is some way to understand how a family arrives at a hospital room like that one, machines beeping, a girl dying in the bed, a son standing in the doorway who had already made his decision before he walked in. To understand that room, you have to go back much further than the hospital. You have to go back to the beginning, and the beginning is not pretty. And I was not a good man in it, even though I believed I was at the time. Alex's mother died when he was born. I won't go into the details of those first years except to say that raising a son alone while grieving his mother produced a version of me that was present but not always there, if that distinction makes sense. I loved Alex in the way that exhausted, grieving people love their children, fiercely and imperfectly, with long stretches of doing my best and shorter stretches of doing considerably less. By the time he was 12, we had a rhythm. It was not a perfect rhythm, but it was ours. Then I met Monica. She was warm, funny, and she had a 7-year-old daughter named Alejandra whose father had left before the girl could walk. I think what happened next is something I can only see clearly in hindsight. I looked at Alejandra and saw a child without a father figure at exactly the moment when I was still carrying guilt about the father I had been to Alex. So I overcorrected. I poured into Alejandra what I felt I had failed to give Alex in those first hard years, and I told myself that was generosity rather than avoidance. And I kept telling myself that for years while the evidence accumulated that I was wrong. Alex said I preferred Alejandra. He started saying it when he was 13, and he kept saying versions of it for years afterward. And every time he did, I told him he was exaggerating or being dramatic or going through a teenage phase. I told myself that too. Now, sitting on the far side of everything that happened, I understand he was not exaggerating even once. I remember a soccer match when he was 15. He had been talking about this final for weeks, had literally taped the schedule to the refrigerator so I would see it every morning. The day of the match, Alejandra came home upset because some classmates had mocked her on social media. She locked herself in her room and cried, and I stayed home with her, and I missed the match entirely. When I came home that night, Alex was sitting in the kitchen in his uniform. He asked me quietly if I had gone even for 5 minutes. I told him Alejandra had needed me more. He said, "You always tell me the same thing," and went to bed, and I remember thinking the conversation had gone reasonably well. There were other moments like that one, each of them small enough that I could justify them individually and only devastating in accumulation. I sold the computer my brother had given Alex because Alejandra needed money for therapy. I canceled one of his birthday celebrations because Alejandra had an anxiety attack and didn't want to leave the house. I asked him to give up his room because hers was smaller, and she needed more space to feel comfortable. Each of these things had a reason, and the reasons were real, and I held them up like shields against the understanding that the pattern they formed together was one of a father slowly disappearing from his son's life while standing right in front of him. Alex pulled away gradually, the way people do when they have learned that closeness only leads to disappointment. He spent less time at home, spoke less to Alejandra, and maintained a tension with her that I kept framing as normal sibling friction rather than what it actually was, which was 2 young people who had been set against each other by a man who could not figure out how to love them both at once. Everything collapsed 5 years ago, at a town celebration. There was music, alcohol, and practically every young person in town was there. Sofia, who was Alejandra's closest friend, had been trying to get Alex's attention for months with no success. That night she told him directly how she felt, and he turned her down. And he did it in front of other people, and she cried. Alejandra stayed with her for the rest of the evening. I heard about it the next day and thought it was ordinary teenage drama, the kind that burns bright and dissolves in a week. A week later, Sofia appeared at my door in tears, saying Alex had abused her after the party. Alejandra, standing beside her, confirmed every word without hesitation. Said Sophia had told her everything immediately after it happened. I want to describe the moment I first saw Alex come downstairs and understand what was happening, because I have replayed it so many times that I have worn it smooth, and I still cannot find in it the moment I should have stopped. He came down and looked at Sophia crying, at Alejandra with her arm around her, at Monica's face, and then at mine. He was confused first, then worried. Then something colder settled over his expression as understanding arrived. He asked what was going on. I told him I wanted to know what he had done to her. He frowned and said he didn't know what I was talking about. Sophia cried harder. Alejandra stood up and said it directly, told him what he was accused of, what was being said he had done after the party. And Alex stepped back and said he had no idea what they were saying, that Sophia had followed him when he was leaving, that nothing had happened, and his voice stayed steady through all of it. And I heard the steadiness, and decided it was the steadiness of someone practiced at lying rather than the steadiness of someone telling the truth. The argument lasted almost an hour. I approached him at one point, and told him that if something had happened, he still had time to face it like a man. He looked at me with something I did not recognize then but understand now, pure, coherent disappointment. He said I was not even listening to him, and he was right. I was not listening. I was watching two crying girls and a son who was not crying. And I had already made my decision, and everything he said afterward was filtered through that decision rather than received on its own terms. Sophia said she would give him a week before filing a report. Alex froze, said she was serious. She said she just wanted him to take responsibility. After that, things moved faster than I could track. During that week, I tried to talk Alex into confessing to something he had not done. I framed it as practical, told him he could still fix things, that admitting a mistake was better than a formal complaint. He kept denying it, and each conversation ended worse than the one before. Then Monica suggested gathering the family, and I agreed, and that remains one of the decisions I am most ashamed of in my life. On that Sunday, my siblings, my parents, and several uncles sat in the living room when Alex came downstairs. He understood immediately what he was walking into. My older brother spoke first, and said his mother would be ashamed of him. An uncle said that if he had gotten the girl pregnant, he needed to be a man about it. Alex slammed the table so hard that everyone in the room flinched, and said again that he had not touched her, and no one listened. Alejandra said Sophia was emotionally destroyed and Alex only thought of himself. Monica said men faced the consequences of their actions. And then I did the thing I cannot undo, which was to ask my son, in front of his grandparents and uncles and the entire assembled judgment of our family, to consider marrying Sophia to avoid a formal complaint destroying his future. He looked at me after I said that, asked me directly if I really preferred to believe them over him. I didn't answer, and the answer to his question was in my silence. He grabbed his things and said he was leaving. My father tried to stop him, and they pushed each other, and I lost what remained of my composure entirely, and slapped my son across the face in front of everyone. The room went completely silent. Alex put his hand to his face slowly and looked at me, and the expression he wore was not hatred, which I think I could have survived, but contempt, which I have been carrying inside me ever since. I told him he could not live under my roof if he was going to act like a monster. He said he hoped someday I would understand what I was doing. Then he left. 2 days later, someone posted the story on social media, and the whole town turned against him before any investigation had taken place. The university suspended him. His scholarship was revoked. Neighbors insulted him on the street. When the police came and took him in handcuffs, he did not look at me. He looked at Alejandra, and the expression on his face was not fear. It was the look of someone who had just confirmed something they had suspected for a long time. Alex spent nearly 3 months in pre-trial detention. During that time, I kept trying to convince myself that 2 girls would not invent something like this without reason, because that was the only way I could continue to function. The belief was not strong, but it was load-bearing, and I held on to it until a security camera at a small shop near the alleged location of the attack showed Alex walking alone toward his house at the exact time Sophia claimed the abuse had occurred. They checked more cameras, more timelines, more statements. There was no physical evidence, no messages, nothing except Sophia's account and Alejandra's corroboration, and both collapsed under scrutiny. They released him. I went to pick him up thinking that an apology, even a partial one, would be enough to begin repairing something. I was wrong about the size of what needed repairing. Alex came out of that place with a small backpack and a face I barely recognized. Something in him had changed in a way I understood immediately was permanent. When I approached, he asked me directly if I believed him now. And instead of saying yes, Instead of saying I am sorry and I was wrong and I will spend however long it takes making this right, I said something about how maybe there had been a misunderstanding. I said the word maybe, about whether my son had been falsely imprisoned for 3 months while I did nothing but apply additional pressure. He stared at me for a long moment. Then he said he no longer had a father. He walked away, and that was the last time I saw him for years. Over time, through acquaintances and fragments of news that found their way back to me, I heard that a professor had helped him finish his degree, that he had found work out of state, that he had rebuilt something resembling a life in a place where no one knew his name or what had been said about him. I heard this the way you hear news about a country you used to live in, with interest, with a specific kind of grief, and with the understanding that you are no longer part of what happens there. Here, things did not improve. The town's opinion divided over time as more details emerged and people began to suspect Sophia had lied. Some stopped speaking to us. Alejandra and Sophia remained close, and I never confronted either of them directly about what they had done, because the truth is I did not know how to hold that conversation and I am not sure I wanted to. 5 months ago, Alejandra and Sophia were in a car accident on the highway. Sophia was driving after they had been drinking. The collision was serious. Sophia was left partially paralyzed. Alejandra suffered severe liver damage, and the doctors told us early and clearly that she would need either a transplant or an extremely expensive surgery to survive. The insurance situation was a disaster. Sophia had been driving. There were questions of negligence, there were lawsuits, and what coverage existed was insufficient. We sold the car. We mortgaged part of the house. We sold land I had inherited from my parents. The debt kept growing, and the doctors kept shortening their estimates of how much time we had. Then an acquaintance mentioned Alex. He was working for a large company now, apparently doing well by any measure, and for the first time since that day outside the detention facility, I thought about going to find him. It took me several days to decide, because part of me understood clearly what I was about to do. Arrive at my son's door needing something from him after years of silence, carrying an apology that was genuine but also convenient in its timing. I went anyway. Monica had already started saying he had a duty to help us, that family did not abandon family, and her words sat uncomfortably alongside my own growing desperation. I found his address through someone who knew someone who had studied with him. I made the drive trying to rehearse what I would say, knowing the rehearsal was useless because Alex had always been better than me at cutting through to what something actually was. When he opened the door, it took me a moment to recognize him fully. He was calm in a way he had never quite been when he was younger, the kind of calm that gets built rather than inherited. He looked at me without surprise, which told me he had perhaps been expecting something like this for a while. He asked what I was doing there. I said I needed to talk. He said he had nothing to talk to me about and moved to close the door, and I put my hand against it and asked him to give me 5 minutes. He took me to a nearby park. We sat on a bench. He told me to speak. I started with the apology, and he said it was 5 years late, and I said I knew. And he said yes, I should have listened to him. Then I told him about Alejandra, the accident, the liver damage, the surgery, the money we did not have and could not find. He listened to all of it without interrupting. When I finished, he asked why I was telling him. I said because she was his sister. He told me not to call her that again. He said something then that I have turned over many times since. He said that what was worst about everything that happened was not the prison and not the rumors. It was realizing his own father had needed less than a week to replace. I said I had never wanted to replace. He shook his head and said I had come because I needed something, and if Alejandra were healthy, I would never have appeared at his door. He was correct, and I could not find a way to honestly disagree. He said he needed to think. Before he left the bench, I asked him directly if he would help us. He took several seconds before answering. He said maybe. That same night, Monica began sending him messages and voice recordings, said Alejandra could die, that family did not leave family behind, that if he had any heart left he would help. He did not reply to any of them. 5 days passed. Then I received a short message from him. He said he would come to the hospital, but that first he wanted to hear the truth. The day he arrived, the atmosphere was already fragile before he walked in. Monica had been crying for hours. Alejandra was in pain and the medications were offering less and less relief. The doctors had repeated again that time was very short. When Alex appeared in the doorway, dressed as though he had come directly from work, Monica moved toward him and said thank you for coming, son, and tried to embrace him. He stood completely still and said hello, nothing else. He did not perform warmth he did not feel, which under different circumstances might have been something I respected. When we went into the room, Alejandra looked at him with an expression I could not entirely read, something between anger and a shame she had not fully acknowledged yet. Alex pulled a chair to the foot of the bed and sat down, and said nothing for a moment. Then he told her that before he decided anything, he wanted to hear something from her. She asked what. He said the truth. She laughed a short, bitter laugh and said he had come all this way just for that. He said yes. Monica tried to intervene. Alex did not look at her. He said that of course this was the moment for it, because before today he had still been considering helping them. The room went very quiet. I moved toward him, asked what exactly he wanted to hear. He kept his eyes on Alejandra and said he wanted to hear her admit what she had done. Alejandra was silent for a while. Then she said something that I think we all understood was going to change the direction of whatever small chance remained. She said, "And what changes now?" Alex let out a short, humorless sound. He said nothing. He just wanted to hear it from her mouth. She closed her eyes. Then she began to talk. She confirmed that Sophia had lied, that after Alex had rejected Sophia publicly at the party, Sophia had come back crying and saying he had humiliated her in front of everyone, and that she, Alejandra, had been exhausted by years of watching him act as though he were above everyone around him, and that she had been tired of it. Alex asked her to continue. She did. She said they had originally only wanted to scare him, thought he would agree to be with Sophia to avoid the trouble, and that neither of them had fully understood how far it would go. Then she said something that none of us were ready for. She said yes, and she had enjoyed watching him stop being the favorite for once. Alex looked at her. He said, "The favorite?" He said it quietly, as though testing the word. Alejandra was crying by then. She said that when she and her mother had first moved into our house, she had never felt like she truly belonged there. That everything had been about Alex, that she had hated how everyone spoke about him, hated that he was good at things, hated the way people's faces changed when his name came up. And then she said that eventually that changed, that I had started choosing her, and that she had liked it, and that she had liked seeing how it bothered him. Alex began to laugh, a slow, empty laugh that was harder to sit with than crying would have been. He said so all of this had started because she was jealous. She said he did not understand anything. He said no. He now understood perfectly. Monica was crying and trying to stop the conversation, but no one was listening to her anymore. Alex asked Alejandra one final question. He asked if she had ever regretted it. She took too long to answer. In that silence, the answer arrived before the words did. Finally, she said she had thought he deserved to lose everything. Alex's expression did something I had not seen before and hoped not to see again. Whatever had remained of softness in it left completely. He stood up slowly. I moved toward him, told him to wait, to please wait. He interrupted me and said he knew what I was going to say. He said, and I will carry this sentence for the rest of my life, that he had already agreed to help us, that he had spoken to a doctor about compatibility testing, that he had the money and had been prepared to use it. Monica started crying harder. She said, "Please, son, please." He did not look at her. He looked at Alejandra and said that after hearing her, he would rather watch her die. The silence that came after that sentence was total. Then I lost whatever restraint I had left, and said something about what kind of monster could say that. And Alex finally broke the careful composure he had maintained through the entire conversation. He said I had destroyed his life. I said that was years ago. He said he had spent months in prison, and now she was dying. And what did I want him to do? Destroy his life again to save the person who had put him there deliberately, who had said on her own deathbed that she was glad she had done it. I reached for his arm. He pulled away sharply. I said Alejandra was still his sister. He said we had stopped being his family the day we chose to believe a lie. I hit him. I have no explanation for it that rises above the level of I lost control and did the wrong thing. He hit me back, much harder, and I went into a chair. Monica screamed. The monitors began alarming as Alejandra became agitated. Nurses and doctors came through the door. Alex backed toward the wall while the room filled with people trying to control what we had all created together. And before he left he looked at all of us and said he had come to make sure we could never ruin his life again. Then he walked out. The doctor stabilized Alejandra that night, but the episode had taken something from her physically that she could not get back. One of the physicians told me quietly that if she kept experiencing stress like that, she likely would not make it to the following month. I called Alex more than 30 times that week. I sent messages every day. I told him I understood his anger. I told him we would publicly tell the truth about Sophia if that was what he needed. He did not respond to any of it. Eventually I tried calling from numbers he would not recognize. The silence was the same. He had drawn a line and stepped behind it, and nothing I sent could reach him. Alejandra died 3 weeks after that afternoon in the hospital. There was no significant final moment, no farewell that meant anything. The doctors told us one morning that her body had stopped holding on, and that was the end of it. The funeral was small. Sophia did not come. Many people in town had heard enough of the truth by then to distance themselves from us. The burial was quiet in the way things are quiet when everyone present understands there is nothing adequate to say. Monica collapsed afterward. She barely spoke and spent most of her time in the room she had shared with Alejandra, and when she did speak to me, she said things that were painful and also accurate. She said I had been a coward twice, once when I failed to protect Alex, and once when I failed to save Alejandra. She said I raised him in a way that ended with a dying girl and a son who shared a last name with us and nothing else. A few weeks ago, I heard from one of Alex's old university classmates who was passing through town. He told me Alex is married now. He has a small son. He changed his last name some time ago, and does not discuss us. When I heard that, something settled into place that I think I had been refusing to let settle. He did not merely leave. He left, and then he remade himself somewhere else, and the remake was thorough enough that we are not even a chapter he keeps accessible anymore. There is a part of me that still cannot fully accept that he let her die knowing he had the money to prevent it. I recognize that part of me and I do not trust it, because it is the same part that watched 2 girls cry and decided that was enough evidence to destroy a boy's life. That part of me has been wrong before in ways I cannot undo, so when it speaks now, I try to hear it, and then set it down, and ask myself instead what a man who has been through what Alex has been through might reasonably decide he owes to the people who put him there. The answer, every time, is nothing. And yet I cannot stop hearing his voice in that hospital room, telling us he had already agreed to help, that the money was there, that he had spoken to a doctor. He had come prepared to save her. We destroyed that in the space of one conversation by being exactly who we had always been. I helped ruin my son's life over a lie I chose to believe. Years later, he came prepared to save the girl who had told that lie, and we made it impossible for him to do it without swallowing something that no amount of money makes swallowable. And Alejandra died, and Monica blames me, and Alex is somewhere raising a child who will probably never know our names. So I ask you, and I mean this genuinely, not as a formality, where does the fault actually live in a story like this one? Because I have been inside it for years and I still cannot find a single wall that doesn't have my handprints on it.